everybody. Welcome to the Abroaders Travel Podcast, your weekly meetup with thousands of entrepreneurs, hustlers, creators, nomads, ninjas, wanderers, and world changers, all seeking to build the skills and connections to live a life without borders. If you want to learn more about what we do or download our entire podcast archive, check out the website, abroaders.com.
Happy Wednesday morning and welcome to another episode of the Abroaders Podcast. I'm Eric checking in from Austin, Texas. AJ is hopefully going to be with us for the news and updates part of the show, but unfortunately he's in Sao Paulo right now, and somebody right outside his apartment decided to fire up the construction equipment, and so I didn't want to subject you guys to that. So I'm going to be doing this solo for the first part of the show. Today I want to talk about the process of booking flights. We've done quite a bit on this recently, but I keep getting really positive feedback from listeners. It's one of the hardest things about saving on travel with points and miles. So today I'm going to run through some of the core things that I think about with the booking process, and then take a look at a flight that I was recently researching with AJ and with a little bit of help from Janelle for a flight he had to book back from Sao Paulo to Austin. So we'll have a concrete example in the core content as well to kind of show you how we've gone through this. Please do send along your questions. We really appreciate input from you guys, and just helps us make the show even better when we've got real examples. And so on that note, before I get into the core content here, I do want to answer a listener question. And before I do that, all of the notes and information from today's show you can find at abroaders.com/188. Okay, so listener question time. This is about applying for cards. This one came in from Alice, and she wanted to know how many cards she should apply for at a single time. And so just for a little bit of context from her email, she let me know that she had a debit card that she's been using for quite a while, and also had a non-rewards card issued by Capital One. I think it was the Capital One Platinum card, which is a really good card for building credit, but it doesn't offer any particular rewards. So it's just sort of a stepping stone card that can get you into a credit position where you can apply for new cards. So the answer for Alice is possibly a little bit different from somebody who's got really established credit and has more than just one credit card account open. But typically at her stage, we recommend just applying for one card at a time. And the reason there is partially also that you want to make sure that you can hit any minimum spending requirement to earn your bonus points. So this is a really awesome opportunity to open a new account, move all of that spending from your debit card or your non-rewarding, just regular old credit card, and put it on a rewards card that's going to help you start building up the points to be able to book a super cheap flight like the one that I'm going to talk about in just a few minutes that we booked with AJ. So for Alice, I definitely recommend just choosing one card. She didn't put in specifics in her email about how much she's spending, but if she's spending at least $1,500 a month on things that she could put on a credit card, I would definitely recommend going after the Chase Sapphire Preferred card, just because the Chase points are super valuable, and they're offering 50,000 points after spending $4,000 in 90 days right now. So that's a really good place to start. But for somebody in your position that doesn't have a bunch of lines of credit, I would recommend starting with one card. That should be enough to get you a round trip flight pretty much anywhere you want to go in economy and paying minimal taxes and fees. So you're looking at spending a few minutes on a application, getting that card, and then just putting it in your wallet and spending it on everyday purchases and being able to transform that regular spending into a ton of savings in the future. You don't need to go crazy and apply for a bunch of cards. Now, I do want to answer this question for somebody that maybe has a little bit more spending. So let's say, $3,000 in monthly spending, maybe a family, or, just somebody who has more expenses on an ongoing basis they can put on cards, and who has a little bit more established credit. So let's say already has a couple of open lines of credit or has had credit card accounts for, at least 5 or 6 years. So has a little bit more of a foundation for their credit score. In that case, it could make sense to do do 2 applications at a time. And so a lot of times you'll want to apply for one card from one of the banks. So let's say the Chase Sapphire card from Chase, and then maybe apply for a card from a different bank like American Express or Citi for your second option. And so that would probably be my strategy. Also, if you have a small business, it can make sense to apply for one personal card and one business card. That way you're leveraging the power of your ongoing spending for both. So thank you so much, Alice, for sending in the question. I would love to answer your question on an upcoming show. So please write into us at support@abroaders.com, and we will answer questions coming up. All right, so let me get into the booking case study here with AJ's ticket back to Austin, and then we will have some news and updates for you at the end, hopefully with Mr. AJ along for the ride. Okay, so let's get started with some award booking strategy. I'm going to go through some of the basics, a few of the questions that you need to ask yourself and try and find the answers to before you start research and as you're going along. And then, as I said, we'll dive into some examples after that. So first of all, let me start with a couple of just overarching goals here. The number one thing is to book an itinerary that works for your schedule. So you never want to lose sight of that. It can be easy sometimes to get carried away with trying to maximize, and you can end up spending a lot more time than necessary with bookings that actually should be relatively easy, just trying to squeeze the last bit of juice out of that orange. So always start with that in mind. Just kind of keep in mind what you'd be willing to pay out of pocket. That's going to be your taxes and fees, and what points you'd be willing to use in exchange to get your flights. And try not to overdo things. If you find an option that looks pretty good, it probably makes sense to book it. And always be aware that these things change. And so with both of the examples that I want to talk about today, I looked a couple of weeks ago. We weren't 100% sure what days AJ exactly wanted to travel. And so we kicked the can down the road, and it ended up coming back to bite us a little bit. I ended up getting a pretty good deal anyways, but it took me way more time than it did on my initial search. So for those of you that do have travel plans, always keep in mind, if it's good enough and you're happy with it, then it's probably a good idea to pull the trigger. Second goal, with that in mind, is to use your points as efficiently as possible. When you start searching, it may turn out that you have more than one option. So that might be in the form of having more than one itinerary that you're able to book. So, different stops, what airport you want to spend time at in between, total travel time, departure time, things like that. Also might mean that you have more than one different type of points that you could use to book the flight. And in that case, you're going to be just sort of comparing how many points you have to spend, relatively how many points you have in that type of currency, and what the taxes and fees look like. And so if you do have multiple options, I think probably the best framework here is to try and maximize your travel savings in the next 6 months. So much can happen with points and miles, and the rules and your ability to get value from your points, that I think it's probably not a great idea for most people to try and think more than 6 months out. Maybe 12 months out makes sense in some cases. But the bottom line is you don't want to be in a spot where you've got a pretty good deal that saves you hundreds of dollars or maybe even $1,000, and you decide to wait and save your points for next time because the next trip may not have award seats that are available. So the basic booking process, there are sort of 3 main questions. What flights can I book with points that I have in my points portfolio? Which flights have award seats that are available? And what is the best combo of price and itinerary? Now, the first 2, there is a difference there. And so I wanted to make sure I point that out because mentally, my first step is always to just take a really high level look at your basic travel search engine. So I usually use Google Flights, but there's a ton of them out there. And so the first step for me is always just looking at what flights are available to your destination. And then after you've got an idea of what airlines serve your destination airport and what type of routes exist, then you want to look at which flights have award seats available, or in other words, which of those flights are able to be booked with points. So we get a lot of questions about why is it so complicated to book with points. So a quick refresher before we get into the details here. Keep in mind that not all flights that you can buy with cash can be booked with points. So that's number 2 that I just mentioned, which flights have award seats. The flights that don't have award seats are what lots of people talk about as blackout dates. So the airline thinks they're going to sell all the seats, and so they're not going to make those available with points, and they're off the table for you. The other reason it can be complicated is that most frequent flyer websites, so the frequent flyer program like American Airlines or United or Delta, they don't always show you all your options. Remember, these guys are running a business. They've got super sophisticated technology that makes it easy for them to hide flights that might be in your best interest and show you the ones that are more expensive or that they want you to buy. So the pricing is not always transparent. And then the last thing to keep in mind is sometimes it might be a better deal to just buy your ticket. And so when I go through the process today, I'm going to explain how I check this. But the bottom line is when you start your search and you just take a look at what airlines or what itineraries are possible to your destination, you want to get an idea of what a paid ticket would cost. Because a lot of times, especially with so many new low-cost carriers competing with the legacy airlines, sometimes you're going to find a flight to your destination that's really affordable. And so it might make sense in that case to just buy this ticket and save points for later. So let's talk about the information that you're going to have to gather. I've already talked about a couple of them, but number one, and this is where I would start sort of taking notes as you're beginning your search. So a few questions to run through, and then I'll go into detail as I go through these examples. So the first one, which airlines serve your destination and which airlines serve your departure airport? Second thing is whether those airlines belong to an alliance. We've talked about this in other shows, but airline alliances are super important because any one type of points, if they're associated with an alliance, can usually book flights on all the airlines in that alliance. So, for example, British Airways is part of One World Alliance. And so that gives them a whole bunch of partners. They can book flights on United. They can book flights on British Airways, obviously. They can book flights on Cathay Pacific, Finnair, Iberia. So there's just lots of different options. So whenever you're looking at those initial routes, you want to make sure you're aware if any of those flights or any of those airlines belong to an alliance. Number three is what type of points you already have. Typically, as just sort of a benchmark, 30,000 points is going to get you a one-way ticket in economy to most destinations. Some of them are a little bit higher, maybe 40,000 or even 50,000, but 30 is pretty common for international. And then if you're looking at shorter flights, like say from the US to the Caribbean or Central America or Mexico or within the US, it's going to be significantly less. But for longer distance, say 7 or 8 hours plus international, 30,000 each way is probably about the number of points you'll need. And so it's always good to just make a quick list, especially if you have a few different types of points, of the ones that you have a big enough balance that it's in play, in other words, to be able to book your ticket. Next up, you want to look at transferable frequent flyer currencies. So these are going to be your Amex membership rewards, Chase Ultimate rewards, and Citi Thank You rewards, as well as SPG hotel program points. All of these can be transferred to a ton of different partner frequent flyer programs. And so if you have any of these points, and by the way, if you're just starting out, these are a great place to start because they give you a lot more options. Those transferable currencies mean that you could potentially have points in a bunch of different programs, even though those points aren't already there. So just a quick example we're going to get into in a few minutes. For this ticket that I was looking at for AJ, he had Amex points and Chase points, as well as Citi. And so what that means is that the Amex points can be transferred to a whole bunch of different partners, and then we can look at options to use those points. So I'm going to cover that as we get into the examples. Next up is how many points are required. Like I said, roughly 30,000 each way, but occasionally there are pretty significant differences in the points that they're asking. And so if you start getting into the search phase and you see that you have more than one option, you want to make a note of which types of points cost how many points so that you can compare head to head and say, if I use American Airlines miles, it's only 30,000 points. Whereas if I use Delta miles, it's going to cost 40,000. That's something you want to be aware of. And the other component to that, this is sort of part A and part B to the pricing equation, is what are the taxes and fees that you're going to pay when you're booking your flight. So last but not least, you want to know how many points it costs for that award ticket and cross-reference that with the points that you've got. Okay, so time to get into the examples. I'm going to start with the easy one and then get into the one that became a huge headache. So stay with me here. So first trip was a return ticket from Sao Paulo back to Austin. Just spoke with AJ this morning, was able to confirm his dates. Looks like ideally we're going to travel on the 18th, but he's pretty flexible that week. So 18th is a Monday, and he's going to be able to travel, a few days after that without too much extra trouble. So that's what we're looking at. And the first thing I did is I did a Google flight search and looked at paid flight options just to see if there happened to be a really cheap one-way fare. Predictably, there wasn't, especially closer to departure. Paid flights tend to get more expensive, and the one-way tickets were at $899. And kind of funny to see this, but that was actually the price for an itinerary with Delta, United, or American Airlines and TAM. So there are 4 different airlines that are offering a one-way flight at that $899 price point. Just kind of goes to show you where the competition is there. Now, the next step that I took here is to take a look at the transferable currencies. So when I talked about this a few minutes ago, I was talking about the opportunity to transfer points to other frequent flyer programs. But before we get into that, the first step with any transferable currency is to see how much it would cost to essentially use your points as cash. So for this, we're excluding Starwood Preferred Guest because they don't allow you to do that. But all 3, Citi, Amex, and Chase, allow you to basically book a flight paying cash, but you use points through their travel portal. So in other words, you go to Citi Thank You Rewards, and instead of going to the transfer page where you can move points to their partners, you just go to book flights. And it basically looks up the cash price of those flights. And with Citibank, the price that they're going to give you is 1.25 cents per point. So in other words, a $900 ticket was going to come out to about 72,000 points. All right. So that's a cash as points option. Amex membership rewards gives you only 1 cent per point, at least with the cards that we have. So that was $900 flight was going to be 90,000 miles. And with Chase Ultimate Rewards, because I have the Chase Sapphire Reserve card, I get 1.5 cents per point towards airfare. So that same $900 flight was going to come out to 60,000 points. So just comparing those 3 head to head, I know immediately that I can eliminate Citi and Amex because there's substantially more points. And so worst case scenario, if nobody has award availability for this itinerary, it's pretty easy for me to say, okay, let's just do Chase Ultimate Rewards. Now, 60,000 points is still pretty expensive. Just for reference, the cheapest price that you can pay with the major frequent flyer programs is 30,000 points for a one-way ticket from Brazil to the US. And typically you can get a business class flight for 50 to 60,000 points. So in other words, if I did do this through Chase Ultimate Rewards, I'd be getting a economy flight for AJ at the price that if there were availability, I should be able to get him a business class flight. So that's a situation where as long as there's some award availability, our best option is going to be to transfer frequent flyer miles from one of those transferable programs to one of the frequent flyer accounts. Now, in addition to having access to Citi, Amex, and Chase points, AJ also has a bunch of Delta points in his account, plenty to make this booking. And so that's another option that we're sort of checking separately. And I always prioritize Delta, at least in the last 6 to 12 months, because Delta has been getting really good at charging more points than everybody else, and they're getting away with it. And so I start with Delta just because if I see that the price is either 30 or 40,000 points, it could be a really good opportunity to use some of those Delta points that AJ has saved up. It's not that common a lot of times. And the outcome that happened this time when I checked Delta is that it was 50,000 points and $60 in taxes and fees. So I checked that route. Everything looked pretty good as far as the itinerary. It was a relatively direct routing. I think the transfer was in Atlanta and then a direct flight to Austin from there. So pretty decent itinerary, but higher in price than we wanted to pay. Again, 50,000 points would be for economy according to Delta right now, but there are some programs that you can get a business class flight for 50,000 from South America to the US. So put that on my list, knew that it was an option to come back to in the worst case scenario. But the next one that I looked at was availability for British Airways points. And so I was looking at One World Airlines. So that's going to include American Airlines and TAM. Those are the only two One World that fly really directly from Brazil to the US. The other one that services South America is LAN. And they're more based in Argentina and Chile. And they also have bases in Peru and Colombia as well. But for this itinerary, we're mostly looking at flights operated by TAM and by American Airlines. And it just so happened that there was some really good availability, multiple days, including the date on the 18th that AJ wanted the most, with a super reasonable stopover in Dallas. So basically it was about the most direct flight that you can get from Sao Paulo to Austin. One stop in Dallas had an option of making it like an hour and 20-minute layover, which is pretty tight if you're going through immigration, especially Dallas immigration can be kind of hairy. So there was also an option for about a 3-hour and 30-minute layover. And so that's the one we picked. And so now the choice here is to decide whether we want to use American Airlines miles or we want to use British Airways miles to book the ticket. So this is where we get into the cash price versus the mileage price and a head-to-head comparison to sort of figure out what makes the most sense. Now, I don't have, nor does AJ have, any British Airways points in their account. So to use British Airways miles to book the ticket, we would have needed to transfer either from Chase or Amex, which are the two programs that transfer to British Airways. SPG does as well, but because they're so valuable, I typically try and use Amex and Chase whenever possible. And also I've got a lot more, or the company, we have a lot more Amex and Chase points available than we have SPG points. So those were the two options. Nowadays, Amex and Chase both transfer at a 1-to-1 ratio. But as we've mentioned on the show before, American Express is currently running a 40% transfer bonus. So it's a little bit cheaper to get British Airways points. You're getting a better than 1-to-1 ratio. So before we get into the transfer mechanics here, the first thing I wanted to do is double check and see how things looked with American, because American Airlines is actually operating these flights and American Miles can book the exact same flights. And we had about 70,000 points available with American. And so looking at that, it was the same price, taxes and fees. So it was going to be $59 or so to pay out of pocket. And with American, it was only 30,000 miles. So that's their saver price for South America to the United States. And so that looks like a pretty awesome deal on the surface. However, because we're within the 21 days from departure, American adds on a $75 fee. It's a close-in booking fee. It's one of those really annoying gotchas. And this is one reason why this itinerary ended up being way more expensive or potentially more problematic than it would have been if I had booked when I first took a look at this a couple of weeks ago, because that $75 fee gets tacked on. However, British Airways does not have that same fee. And for British Airways, the price is 32,500 miles. So only 2,500 miles extra, same taxes and fees at $59. And so in this case, it makes much more sense to go with British Airways because we can avoid that close-in booking fee. However, with the Amex transfer bonus, that gets even better, because to get 32,500 miles, we only need to transfer 23,250 Amex points. So thanks to that 40% bonus, this flight was only 23,250 Amex points. It was super easy, straightforward to book. All you have to do in this case is log into your Amex account. You're going to go to the transfer miles page inside of membership rewards, and you're going to pick the number of points you want. Always double check your frequent flyer account. Make sure that you account for any miles that you already have. I only had about 135 miles for whatever reason, just stranded in my account. So there wasn't anything significant that was already there. And so I ended up just transferring the minimum number of points that would get me to 32,500 and ended up being a really, really solid deal. And so the last step here is just a quick analysis of the value that you're getting for each point. It's kind of the best way to compare on a head-to-head basis or apples to apples how you're doing with your points. So I want to run through the equation real quick. So the flight, again, to buy the ticket was about $900. the cost was $59 in taxes and fees. And so that means that the total savings here is $839 by spending these points. Now, if we had already had 32,500 British Airways miles stashed away in our executive club account, our BA account, that would mean about 2.6 cents per point of savings. And that's a really good number, just generally speaking, especially for economy. A lot of times business class, because those tickets are so expensive, will be up closer to 3 or 4 cents per point or even higher. But for economy, anything over 2 cents a point is great. And a lot of times I still will book things that are in the 1.5 cents per point range. So 2.6 is a really good deal. However, because of that transfer bonus, my baseline amount of points that were required is actually only 23,250 Amex points, which means that my cents per point value for those Amex points, those 23,000 that were transferred, is 3.61 cents per point to save $839. So again, really awesome deal. This is kind of a rare booking in that it was relatively simple. All I really did was check Delta and then took a look at the American availability and saw that it was going to be a really nice routing and that the ticket was going to be something that was easy to book and also had really low taxes and fees. Thanks a lot to Brazil for not adding any fuel surcharges or any extra expenses to award tickets. It's a really good place to originate an award ticket. And so overall, yeah, this was an excellent deal. And all in, the research took maybe about 25 minutes. So pretty straightforward process and super happy with the result. And then I'm going to go through 2 award bookings, both of them for AJ, that myself and our team have been working on. And we finally got what we think is the best option. So I'm going to take you not only through what we ended up booking, but also all the other stuff that we tried first that didn't end up working. So get into that in just a second. And again, we will have some news and updates for you at the end of the show. This is episode 188, and today is Wednesday, September 13th. So all the show notes and any links from today will be at the show notes page, abroaders.com/188. Okay, guys, time to get into the news and updates for this week's show. Again, this is episode 188, so show notes at abroaders.com/188. AJ is fortunately here with me, checking in from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Glad they stopped the earth movers over there so you could join me today, man.
Yeah, man, that was brutal. I have no idea what kind of work they're doing, but very happy they're done with that. And man, it's been a trying day. Originally, we're going to record this podcast earlier, then I had to cancel it because I got locked in on a balcony that somehow there's a lock on it, and I slid the door shut. And man, thank God I had my phone. Otherwise, I think I would have been just screaming from the 7th story at people leaving the building to see if they could talk to the bellhop essentially to come up and let me out. But if the door to the apartment would have been locked and I did not have my cell phone, I think I would have had to wait until about 8 p.m. I think I would have been stuck there for 7 or 8 hours and just would have had to deal with it.
God, when you told me about that, I mean, that's just one of those scenarios that's beyond belief. Everybody's locked themselves out of their car or out of their house at some situation, but to lock yourself on a little balcony on the 7th floor is just an absolute nightmare, man. I'm glad that worked out.
Yeah, but here I am inside with the security of the house. Cool, man. Well, one more piece of news real quick. For any listeners that know a little bit more about the company and the people that work behind the Broaders that aren't involved in the podcast, I'm actually here in Sao Paulo, Brazil to go to George, who has done all the technical work on our product. His wedding was last night, and that was pretty cool. That's the second Brazilian wedding I've been to. And it was a good time. It was a cool experience. Definitely a little bit different than an American wedding.
Yeah. I loved getting the video and the photos. I've never been to a Brazilian wedding, and I've heard that they can be, pretty crazy and sort of extravagant. It's definitely a big deal, and like lots of places, obviously it's really fun to celebrate. And to me, it's just always interesting to see like a celebration that has its equivalent everywhere. In a particular culture, especially one that you really love.
Yeah.
The Brazilians, they know how to celebrate. So I bet you had a really nice time.
It was really cool too because George's family was there. So George's two brothers and his parents, and his parents obviously don't speak a lick of Portuguese. So during the ceremony, they had these little translation cards. So they had the ceremony because George gave a little bit of word, and Jessica, his wife, gave a little bit of a speech as well, and they wrote their own wedding vows. So it's kind of funny watching George's dad and mom kind of follow along and like hearing all the Brazilians laugh about inside jokes about soccer and stuff, and they're kind of getting it, but.
So George spoke in Portuguese at his wedding.
He did, man. He did a fantastic job. He, I think, was a little bit nerved up at the beginning and kind of was working that Catalan Spain cadence kind of mumbly quick, and then he settled in and he even worked in some jokes about how he's been converted now to be a Palmeiras fan, one of the football clubs here in São Paulo. But yeah, he did a really good job.
Awesome, man. All right, well, let's dive into some news and updates. Top story today is just a reminder, but an important one. The British Airways 40% transfer bonus is ending on September 17th. So this is the last episode before that is going to happen. So that's going to be Sunday, I believe, of next week. So or Sunday of this week, rather. So you've got a few more days to be able to convert your Amex membership rewards into British Airways. We have already transferred about 30,000 Amex points, I think, and probably are going to do a few more. The booking that I talked about earlier on today's show is one where that came into play and saved us about 9,000, 10,000 points overall by being able to use that transfer bonus. So definitely a good opportunity, especially if you have a lot of Amex points. I wouldn't use your last 20 or 30,000 Amex points to take advantage of this because you never know what program is going to work for your next ticket. But if you've got enough membership rewards to have a couple of trips, this is one of those transfer bonuses that I think is worth a serious look.
Yeah, man. When you just do the math and consider, you really get into that great pricing where there's pretty much set pricing where from the US to Europe is around 30,000, give or take. And from the US to South America, 30K, Asia, 35-ish. But this transfer gets you down into the mid to low 20s. In some cases in the teens for flights between the US and Europe, which is huge.
Yeah, it definitely can be a cool opportunity with the distance-based chart, especially if you've got a direct flight or a way to position so that you can make it a direct flight. And British Airways also has off-peak pricing that's going on right now for a lot of regions. So I think we talked about this previously, but looking at like my flight that I just took back from London to Austin was only 16,250 points with British Airways, which made it under 12,000 points with Amex for a one-way from Europe back to the US. So there are some awesome deals to be had. That's like a third of the price of your typical award from Europe to the US in economy.
Yeah, and especially when you think about what you can do with Amex points. So you do that, you paid 12,000. Let's say you were stubborn and you went to Delta because that's familiar and that's what you know. Could have been 35,000, if not more. Air France, 25K, like that just shows you that the points game is alive and well as far as being very clever with the way you redeem points if you really understand all the partners and programs and opportunities like this. Next up, we've got a nice promotion here that I think we're going to figure out a way to take advantage of this. And this is with Marriott and SPG. So it's a fall promotion. So this is something you do need to register for. You can't just go search on the website and take advantage of it. So you got to register between September 6th and November 30th. And then as far as your travel goes, you've got to stay between September 12th and January 15th of early next year. And how this works is you can earn a free night stay after staying 2 nights. So as far as the details go, after you stay 2 nights at a category 1 through 5, you'll get a free, if you stay 2 nights at a Marriott SPG property, you'll get a free night at a category 1 through 5 hotel. And you can only do this once per member. So, if you got some couples traveling, you guys could double dip, have one person book through their registration and their account ID and all that stuff. But this is pretty nice. And this is going to come into play looking like the Amsterdam trip I'm going to do. This we could piecemeal some things together with stacking some different promotions and pre-existing perks with credit cards.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I think one thing here, I'm pretty confident that Starwood and SPG and Marriott are still separate with these promotions. So they've got the same type of promotion going on, but I think you can do this once through your Marriott account and once through SPG. So a single individual could potentially get 2 free nights total by doing a 2-night stay with SPG and a 2-night stay with Marriott. So we're going to explore that, and we will get back to you guys on what we end up doing. But overall, you've got a 6-night stay coming up in Amsterdam. So that makes this really interesting because we're already looking at how we can use the City Prestige card's 4th night free benefit. So basically pay 3 nights and get the 4th night on City. And so we're going to combine that. Basically what this means is we're going to try and find the most efficient way to get you set up paying for 3 out of the 4-night stay at one of those 2 chains, and then make a switch, hopefully not too far across town, and check in with the other hotel chains and save up a couple of big free nights.
Yeah, here's something I'm unaware of. So as far as this promotion goes, I didn't read all of the details about it, but if you stay your 2 qualifying nights, you register, you do all the things you're supposed to do, does that mean the 3rd night is free, or that means you get a credit for a 1-night stay at a category 1 through 5 hotel?
Yeah, I think this is a credit to be used in the future. Typically with these types of promos, it takes a little bit of time to post. So I'm glad you brought that up because it's important to make the distinction. With the City 4th night free, it has to be a 4-night or more stay. And so you pay for 3 out of the 4, and City pays the hotel for the 4th night. So that's something that all
and that's the math on this could.
This one is one, as far as I understand it, that they're just going to credit, sometime after your stay posts. Typically these kinds of things, they say it'll be, up to 6 weeks, but a lot of times it happens relatively soon after that. So these are some freebie nights that you or I or one of the Abroaders team might be able to use in a future travel situation somewhere down the line with either Starwood or Marriott.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Next up, we have an Amex offer that has to do with supermarket. So this is a targeted offer. So for those people with Amex cards, you understand how this works. The current offer that we've seen is spend $100 at a U.S. grocery store, online or in store, and get 1,500 membership reward. So this isn't super lucrative, but you don't have to do a whole hell of a lot. And if, let's say, you consider Amex points worth 2 cents per point, you're talking about spending $100 at a grocery store, however the hell you want, and then you get essentially $30 off in the form of membership rewards.
Yeah, that's a pretty awesome deal. And, potentially if everybody needs groceries, so I don't think it should be trouble there to spend $100.
Yeah, no stretch
to make it easy.
Exactly.
You could just go buy an Airbnb gift card for $100. A lot of grocery stores have gift cards that would be useful. Amazon, Airbnb, Uber, something that you're going to use anyways. And you could do that. Especially, I guess that could make sense in a situation where maybe you've got another rewards card that earns a bunch of points at a supermarket. So there's some that offer up to 6x on spend at a supermarket. So maybe you don't want to do all of your groceries on that. So it could be easy to just buy a $100 gift card and grab those 1,500 membership rewards and then use the gift card for Airbnb or Amazon.com or whatever floats your boat.
Yeah, man. Let's keep this moving. So we've got a couple things with credit cards. You want to take this one with United. We've actually got a couple of no fee credit cards. I think it's good that we touch on this.
Yeah. So obviously it's always a good thing when you don't have to worry about negotiating or avoiding an annual fee. United and Chase are rolling out a new card that earns cash back. It's called the United Travel Bank card, and it's going to earn cash instead of miles. So you're going to be earning 1.5% back on purchases and 2% back on United purchases. The card's got a sign-up bonus of $150 after you spend $1,000 in the first 3 months. And another benefit is that you get 25% back on food and drink purchases on United flights, and there are no foreign transaction fees. So I think bottom line, there are other more attractive cards if you have a lot of spend and haven't already maxed out some of the major rewards cards. But if you're just getting started, this could be a pretty interesting opportunity here. This is, to me, it seems like sort of a direct competitor with the Freedom Unlimited card, where you also get 1.5% cash back. And if you have one of the Chase Premium cards, the Freedom Unlimited points can transfer to their partner. So before you make moves on this, I would take a look at Freedom Unlimited, but this is a nice alternative option and something that may be available to folks that don't have enough spend to get a card that requires, 3,000 or 4,000 spend in the first 90 days.
Any speculation on credit requirements for this card? Do you think this will be something that'll have, slightly lower standards than the other co-branded cards United has done?
Well, I know that, like I said, the head-to-head comparison with the Freedom Unlimited is kind of obvious, and that one requires pretty good credit. I'd say like 670 plus. So it definitely is something I want to look into and see if this might be a good recommendation for people that are starting out, just working on establishing credit. Sometimes those co-branded cards are a little bit easier to get. And It looks like this product is sort of targeted at that market. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is one that's accessible to people that are out of the range for the Freedom Unlimited. Something we'll check out and certainly get back to you guys and let you know what we find out.
Yeah, man. So speaking of no-fee cards and competition, it's kind of funny how these things happen around the same times. Amex is rolling out a no annual fee card with Delta. So this is called the Amex Delta Blue, so it's going to join their other cards, which would be the Gold, Platinum, and Reserve. Pretty similar to the United offer, where you could earn 2 miles on Delta purchases, 1 on anything else, 20% off in-flight purchases, which that'll show up as a statement credit. You do get a little bit of a sign-up bonus here, but nothing substantial considering it's Delta. So you get 10,000 miles after $500 spent in 90 days. So I guess the good points about this card is for people out there that, Eric, that you and I can't convince that annual fees are worth it if the sign-up bonus is big enough and if you spend enough. Like, for people that are just against annual fees, this is better than your generic card that isn't earning you anything. I like that it's got a low minimum spend. So for people out there that aren't huge spenders, $500 is pretty attainable over the course of 90 days. But then again, only 10,000 miles, you're not going to do a whole lot with that. But if you already have flown a little bit on Delta, I could see some situations where this could make sense. And if somebody likes to keep things simple, there's no annual fee. So, keeping the card open and forgetting about it, you're at no real risk as long as you don't carry a balance.
All right. So moving on, we got one more sort of interesting promotion. This is for an existing card, so not a new product here, but the Barclay Aviator card, which is sort of a direct competitor to the Citi Platinum Select. It's a card that earns American Airlines miles, and they are rolling out a new program called Flight Sense, which basically allows you to round up your transactions and be able to get some extra points at a discount, potentially a really nice discount compared with what it would cost to just buy American miles. So the basics of how this work are every time you make a purchase, if you've enrolled in this, they'll round up to the nearest dollar. And so let's say you buy something that costs $3.10, then that would round up 90 additional cents would get billed to your card for a nice even $4 transaction. And those extra 90 cents that you pay will either earn you 90 frequent flyer miles or potentially 45. It looks like they're targeting this differently for different people. And so the main reason we're featuring this is if you are one of those people that 90 cents rounded up is going to give you 90 miles, that's buying American miles for 1 cent a piece, and typically the best you're ever going to do. And by the way, that's when you buy a lot of miles, typically is going to be like 1.7, 1.8 cents. So this is much cheaper. Now, if you only get 45 miles for 90 cents rounded up, or in other words, you're getting half the rate there, which seems like what most people are targeted at. This probably isn't worth it, just because, that 2 cents per mile, unless you're buying a lot of business class tickets, that's the only place it would come out ahead for you. And you're probably not going to end up with that many miles. You and I were kind of trying to do the math here about how many transactions in a month it might take to really do this. And, let's say you're averaging 50 cents per transaction that gets rounded up. Even if you're getting 1 mile per cent rounded up, you'd have to do 100 transactions to get 5,000 miles. So for most people, this isn't going to put a huge dent in your American balance. It's not going to be a massive factor to really help you buy points quickly. But over time, it could make sense, especially if you're in the, the better targeted range here. And yeah, it'd be interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing how people try and game this, because it seems ripe for manufacturers.
Yeah, I don't think they did their homework either, because let's remember the folks that get that Aviator Red card, generally not huge spenders, at least the way we would recommend the card. That's an awesome card for somebody that doesn't spend a whole lot of money, i.e. somebody that may be interested in manufacturing spend because they don't have that brute force, 3, 5, 10K a month on a credit card. So I feel like the people that have the Aviator Red card are the type of people that may do some manufactured spend stuff in the past. And there could be there could be some alignment. So, I mean, I know that there's got to be some people out there that figure out a thing to do, whether there's a local little, I don't know, mall, and they just hit up like 10 stores in a row just every day on their way to work to buy like pack of gum, a coffee, or whatever. I don't know, but there's definitely a way to do this. But like you said, I wouldn't go crazy on this if manufactured spend is not in your vocabulary and going around and doing a bunch of work for 5,000 miles. So for the people that out there that are potentially into this, you know who you are. Let us know how this goes for you if you try to do something.
Yeah, I could see like self-checkout at a place like Walmart where nobody's paying attention is the lowest friction way to do this. Find something that comes out to, $1.01. But again, I think that Barclays is going to shut down people that are doing lots of transactions, especially at the same merchant, back to back to back. So I think, the bottom line here is if you can buy points for 1 cent a piece, turn this baby on and start topping up your balance because you'll get much more value than that. Otherwise, this is probably one to forget unless you want to really explore. And if you do, let us know how it goes.
Yeah, man. Speaking of deals to forget, this next one isn't necessarily one to completely write off, but we're doing the math on this one as well. So there's a transfer bonus between Citi and JetBlue. So you get a 25% bonus, which sounds nice on the surface. However, Citi and JetBlue, they're not one-to-one transfer partners. So you transfer 1,000 Citi points, you only get 500 JetBlue points. So now you're talking about you transfer 1,000 Citi points to get 625 JetBlue points. And that's better than the status quo. And there's a lot of things that go into the way JetBlue prices their flights and points because it's revenue based. So the cost of the flight, and sometimes they tweak the ratio. But kind of what we were talking about earlier is if you've got Citi points, you might be better off if you want to fly on JetBlue and use your Citi points, booking through Citi. And then you're going to book what, 1.25, 1.25, and then you're also going to earn some JetBlue points from that, as opposed to a straight transfer and redemption where you're not going to earn any points.
Yeah, I think that's 100% right. For most people, it's not going to make sense. The way to check is, again, just log into Citi and go to the travel portal and just look at flights and see how many Citi points directly it takes you to buy a flight on JetBlue and figure out how many points you're going to earn with that flight. And then head to head, see what the transfer would look like. It's 1-to-1 with this bonus. So it's less than 1-to-1 normally. So it's just not even it's not a great deal overall generally. But there's
I thought this was just a 25% bonus.
It is, but the regular ratio is 1,000 Citi points gets you 800 JetBlue points. So I
don't know why I thought it was 1,000 to 500 because I was just checking that and I thought 1,000 points, 500 promo is 625.
Yeah, that's with the no fee card. So if you've got like the Citi Thank You the Prestige, then you've got the 1-to-1 direct.
Right.
But you're right.
But
so
prefer
the lower level cards, the normal rate is 2 Citi points gets you 1 JetBlue point, and the improved rate is a little bit better than that. Not worth it. Anyway, right. I think that pretty much covers it. We've got one more piece of news, and that is the Equifax data breach. So this news came out last week, and looks like just some bad guys got a hold of a lot of people's data through one of the major credit reporting bureaus. So we've got a couple of steps here just for you to take a look and make sure that everything's okay. I think the bottom line, we talked about this a little bit before we started recording. And Equifax has got a service that they're basically giving you what looks like free access to some ongoing credit monitoring. But the best case scenario for most people may just be to keep an eye on your credit report for a little while by using a free service like Credit Karma, and just making sure that no new accounts are being opened in your name or people aren't applying for loans. Certainly this can be serious, but when there's millions and millions of people affected, I think the big thing that you want to do personally is to just take a look at your Credit Karma or whatever other site. There's a couple of other free resources that you can use to check your credit and just make sure nothing appears out of order. And if it does, you want to contact the credit bureaus immediately and freeze your credit report and resolve it through their resolution process. So, for example, if you see a new credit card account that you didn't open or a new loan that's been applied for, those are the things where you want to call right away. And it seems to me that the best process here is to just check in, every once in a while and make sure nothing looks out of order.
Yeah, I think that's good. For the lazy people out there that don't want to do a whole lot of work. I think at the very least, create a Credit Karma account. And at least for me, I'm pretty sure I'm assuming this works for everybody, is if there's a change for better or worse to your score, you get an email. So, I mean, at the very least there, you've got something set up where you don't go 6 months down the line and say, ah, shit, somebody took out a loan in my name and dinged up my credit. So at the very least there, you're talking about on a monthly interval, you're at least checking in on Credit Karma. And it's easy. You click in the email, you log in, and there it is,
All right. Anything else, man? I think that pretty much covers us.
Yeah, man, I think that is it. I guess one final thing I'll say about the Equifax data breaches for anybody out there that's like super principled. I followed this fairly close on Twitter and have seen a lot of reactions from technically competent people and people that I think are fairly bright. And I know one thing that pissed off a lot of people was it seems in some step of whatever their offering is for credit tracking or security, you are agreeing to not sue them, which I know a lot of people found unsavory. So if you're super principled and want to have that in your back pocket, just make sure you know where you're agreeing to if you take them up on anything, because that's one thing I've heard over and over and over again is people were pissed off that they're forfeiting their right to take any legal action if they opt in and do this. And the final thing is there's a little tool where you can plug in your, last 6 digits of your social and your name or something like that. And from what I've heard, it's not been very accurate. So I don't know how much you can trust that. I don't know how much it helps anybody, but I guess, the more you know.
Yeah. Hey, stay vigilant. Keep an eye on your credit report. I think that's the most important thing. Thanks so much for being with us. And big thank you for the listener question from Alice at the beginning of the show. If you have questions and would like AJ and I to break them down and try and give you an answer, send them along to support@abroaders.com.
All right, everybody, travel safe.
Hey, Broaders, don't be shy. Hop over to the website and join our email list for exclusive travel hacking content. If you like what we're up to, the best way you can support the show is by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. Lastly, we would love to hear from you, so send your